Every 34 seconds, someone dies from heart disease. And what most people don't realize is that half of those people had normal cholesterol levels. That doesn't mean cholesterol is not important, but there's a lot more to heart disease than just cholesterol. That's why I'm excited to be able to start using the cardiozuma test. It looks far beyond cholesterol to what's really happening inside your arteries. As a naturopathic doctor, I see clients every week and they're often told their heart health looks fine or just take a statin until something goes wrong. The cardiozuma goes deeper, looking at metabolic health, oxidative stress, endothelial function, lipids, inflammation, ceramides, sterols, and much more. It's like getting a full body scan of your cardiovascular system. This was like a test that you've never had done before. In this test, I'll walk through each section, why it matters, the key markers, what they mean, and how it affects your heart disease risk. So let's start with the metabolic risk. Your metabolism sets the tone for your entire cardiovascular system. When insulin and glucose go out of balance, your arteries take a hit, years before cholesterol even leads to things like atherosclerosis. Chronically high insulin stiffens the blood vessels, raises blood pressure, and triggers inflammation. So even if your fasting glucose looks normal, insulin resistance may be silently damaging your arteries. Let's have a look at what the cardiozuma shows and what these results actually mean. So this is the first page of the cardiozuma test, and this is a summary page, and we'll have the Reynolds risk score and the Framingham risk score, and this is calculated not just from the test results, but from a questionnaire that you fill out along with the test, giving information about your family history, smoking, alcohol, diet, and this is a predictor of cardiovascular risk over the next 10 years. Then there's a summary of your results on the first page. Now we'll go into the metabolic results. The first one is hemoglobin A1C. This is an average of your glucose over the past 3 months. And ideally you want this less than 5.6. Glucose is your fasting glucose at that very particular moment. And this is probably better than the A1C tests. Glycated serum protein is an average of your glucose over the previous 2 to 3 weeks. And this is a little bit more specific than the A1C. C-peptide is how much insulin you're producing by the pancreas. And then the insulin score lets us know whether you're insulin resistant or not. So you could have normal glucose but higher insulin. And while the reference range is 2 to 25, really you want to be less than 10 and in that sort of 3 to 6 range here. And the HOMA-IR is a calculation of the insulin and glucose. Adiponectin is an inflammation marker, and you don't want to be too low or too high with that. TMAO is a gut microbial metabolite made from carnitine and choline. Carnitine you don't want too low, but you also don't want too higher levels. While ferritin is often thought of as an iron storage marker, levels in excess of 300 are indicative of inflammation in the body or iron overload, which can also lead to heart disease. Leptin is a satiety hormone and it's an indicator of leptin resistance, and it's generally higher the more overweight you are. Next we go into the liver markers, ALT, AST, GGT, and most of these things here are on the standard CBC and CMP test. We won't go into these in detail because most people have probably seen these. They're all important in relation to cardiovascular disease. One thing that you probably haven't had checked is cystatin C. This is more accurate as a kidney marker when compared to things like estimated GFR levels. The most important thing to focus on with the metabolic is lowering your insulin and average blood glucose levels. Now let's look at oxidative stress, your body's internal rust detector. Now that we've covered metabolism and insulin resistance markers, the next step is what happens when that is out of balance, and that is oxidative stress. When your blood sugar and insulin stay high for too long, it's like leaving metal out in the rain. It's going to start to rust. And this is what's happening on the inside of your arteries, is they start to rust, or in other words, they start to harden and stiffen because of oxidative stress. These markers show you how well your body is handling that stress. If they're off, that means your antioxidant defenses aren't keeping up. That could be due to genetics or just being overwhelmed. And that's where a lot of the early aging and cardiovascular damage begins. So let's have a look at the oxidative stress markers on the cardiozuma. Here are the oxidative stress markers. This first one, 8-OHDG, is probably the most important one here, and you want to have these levels very low. This is a marker of DNA oxidation. The next ones are looking at overall lipid peroxidation like F2 isoprostane and the overall oxidative stress load. These ones here are driven by the immune function, so all of these you want to have quite low, and if they're elevated, it indicates that you may need more antioxidants. And one of the best antioxidants is omega-3 fatty acids. So here we measure things like EPA and DHA levels. That can help to understand whether you need to improve your EPA, DHA, or both. But probably the most important score here is the omega-3 index. You want to see this above 8%. And if it's not, you can either increase the fish oils in your diet or eat more oily fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines are one of the best ones to eat. And if you have high levels of oxidative stress markers, it doesn't mean you need to take lots of antioxidants. A lot of this can be done by improving the antioxidant levels in your food and having better sleep and better recovery. So let's see how this damage shows up in your arteries and the endothelium function markers next. Next, let's see how that damage shows up in your arteries, and this is endothelial function. Oxidative stress sets the stage, but the real damage shows up in your blood vessel lining. This is what we call the endothelium, and when that lining gets irritated, it stops producing enough nitric oxide, which means less blood flow, higher blood pressure. So in this next section, we'll look at how well your arteries can relax and expand, and basically how youthful your blood vessels are. High levels of ADMA block nitric oxide production. It's like putting gum in a keyhole. SDMA is the clearance, and this is more to do with kidney function. And homoarginine is an alternative nitric oxide substrate. Lower levels are associated with increased risk. Arginine levels are important for endothelial function, along with citrulline. And with these ratios here, you want to look for a high arginine to ADMA ratio. You don't want to see a low level like this. Once your blood vessels start to lose that flexibility, cholesterol becomes a bigger deal. But here's the thing, cholesterol itself is not the enemy, it's how it's packaged and whether it's being delivered to the right places. So next we'll look at the standard lipid markers like LDL and HDL, but also some advanced lipid markers that tell us whether cholesterol is being used efficiently or building up where it shouldn't. Let's look at these markers on these cardiozoomer test. So the cardiozoomer, of course, checks the standard cholesterol markers, triglycerides, HDL, and LDL that your normal test does. But it also measures some more advanced markers, like Lp(a). This is something everyone should have it checked at least once. This is a genetic marker. It's usually not modified by diet, lifestyle, things like that. And higher levels indicate an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. It doesn't mean that everyone with high Lp(a) will get heart disease, but these are the sort of people that often get heart disease early in life, in their 50s, 60s, and you want to make sure that everything else is optimal. The other most important marker is apolipoprotein B. This is like a marker of the small, dense LDL atherogenic particles. And we want to see this less than 90 ideally, and this is one of those ones where lower the better. The ratios here we want to see on the low side, and the most important things from this part of the test is the ApoB and the lipoprotein A. Next we go deeper into the ceramides. This is a new cholesterol marker. Most people stop at cholesterol, but there's a newer class of fats called ceramides, and they can tell an even deeper story. These are signaling molecules that drive inflammation and plaque formation long before cholesterol changes. In this next section, you'll see why ceramides are one of the strongest predictors of heart disease risk, even if everything else looks fine. Let's have a look at the ceramides on the cardiozoomer. And these are the ceramides, and most people would not have had these tested before. I know I certainly haven't, and they're an independent predictor of cardiovascular disease, independent of LDL. They reflect lipotoxicity and inflammation, and it's lower the levels that you want to see here. And you want to see low levels of these ratios. So higher ratios is a higher cardiovascular risk. So the best way to drop these is with lowering down weight, increasing omega-3s, and even exercise can help to lower ceramides. Now let's talk about why cholesterol levels differ so much from person to person. Some people make too much cholesterol in the liver, others absorb too much cholesterol from foods, and diet changes affect them differently. The sterile markers show whether you're an overproducer of cholesterol or an overabsorber, which means we can finally stop guessing and tailor your plan precisely. Let's have a look at the sterile markers on the cardiozoomer test. So sterols indicate whether you are absorbing too much cholesterol or producing too much cholesterol. And you want to see low levels of cholesterol production and low levels of absorption. So if you've got high levels of absorption, that means you're absorbing too much cholesterol from the foods you're eating. And this is where diet and lifestyle can have a bigger effect on lowering down your cholesterol, as well as adding things like fiber. If you're producing too much, this could be more genetic. It may be harder to get down just by natural dietary changes. Even if cholesterol and fats are well balanced, inflammation is the match that lights the fire. Chronic low-grade inflammation keeps the immune system on high alert and otherwise turns harmless cholesterol into unstable plaque. Everything we've spoken about so far has been important, but inflammation is probably the #1 driver of cardiovascular disease. Things like CRP, interleukin-6, homocysteine, tumor necrosis factor. And to see how much of this fire is burning, we'll have a look at the cardiozuma test. Many of these markers are never tested on the average blood test. Here we have the inflammation markers. One of the most important is high-sensitive C-reactive protein. This is sometimes tested by doctors, and you want to see a level less than 1 ideally. Homocysteine is a methylation marker, and high levels can damage the endothelium as well. You want to keep this in ideally the 5 to 8 range, as a minimum less than 9. Interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor are two very important inflammation markers that are rarely tested in the standard tests. These are cytokines linked to insulin resistance and plaque rupture. So all of these markers can rise with things like poor sleep, stress, processed food diets, anything that increases inflammation. At the same time, it can decrease quite quickly if you get onto a good diet, get plenty of sleep, and do everything to help heal and recover. If inflammation keeps going, your immune system starts sending the repair crews into fixing that arterial wall damage. They're called macrophages. And the problem is these repair crews sometimes make things worse, leading to soft plaque that can rupture and cause blood clots. This next group of markers show whether plaque is unstable, inflamed, and how much stress your heart and clotting system is under right now. So let's have a look at these clotting markers on the cardiozuma test. MPO or myeloperoxidase and plaque are inflammation markers that can lead to more plaque buildup. And along with oxidized LDL, this is LDL that's been damaged, so high levels can increase risk of plaque formation and atherosclerosis. The next one's looking at the clotting factors. T-dimer is a clotting activity marker. NT-proBNP looks at the stress on the heart wall. Troponin is a marker of cardiac injury. This is often high after someone's had a heart attack or a serious cardiac injury. Creatine kinase is an indicator of muscle and liver stress. This could be elevated even just after a big strength training workout the day before. So I always recommend people, before they do a test like this, not to do high intensity exercise the day before testing or heavy lifting, because you might artificially or temporarily raise some of these markers. So whenever these markers are high, it's definitely time to act. Lifestyle changes, detoxification, exercise can all help to lower these down, and potentially medication may be needed. So at the end of the test, it'll have a variety of different suggestions looking at different dietaries, supplements, nutritional markers, or nutritional agents that can potentially help. Doesn't mean you need all of these. I always work with a practitioner to help guide you on the best way to improve your cardiovascular risk. So as you can see, each section of the cardiozuma builds on the last. Even if one of these sections is out of balance, especially if it's way out of balance, you're going to increase your cardiovascular risk. But if there's a number of areas out of balance, the risk is going to be greatly increased. There's also another test add-on which is optional for the cardiozuma, and that's called cardiogenetics. And that looks at a whole range of different genes that help to predict your cardiovascular risk, but also help you understand which medications or drugs may or may not be good for you. If you want to find out more about the cardiogenetics test or how to order the cardiozuma, I'll leave links in the description below. And leave a comment below if you're interested in ordering the cardiozuma test, or let me know if you've had problems with your doctor ordering anything more than the basic cholesterol panel.